Hello and welcome to this Metaphorics 4PS Dynamics Nav 2018 Finance Training Part 3. My name is Pauline Forder, and in this session we will be going through the new functionality that allows us to submit our VAT returns online to HMRC. I will be taking you through the new setup that's now required in Navision. We'll be looking at something called Service Connections, and specifically within there is GovTalk, where we enter our credentials to be able to do that online submission. There are some new manual setup pages which are basically quick links to all the relevant setup screens that we need for our VAT, so our VAT report, which is our online submission itself, the VAT posting setup, again just a quick link to get to those pages, and the VAT statements. The VAT statement itself. On our VAT statement we have a new field called box number, and this relates to the boxes on your submission that you make to HMRC. We will then go and have a look at the VAT posting setup. There is again a new field in there called used in ledger entries, which gives you quick access to the entries that have been posted to the particular combination of the VAT setup. We will then move on to submit the VAT return itself. Within that, I will just quickly run through the process as we know and love it at the moment, looking at the VAT statement and doing the calc and post and doing our reconciliation, so that when we come to do our online submission, we can confirm that we are reporting the correct information. There's a functionality within the VAT return report which allows us to suggest the lines that are going to be submitted this time, how we submit our online VAT return, what messages we get and where we view those from, and the ability to resubmit those returns if required. So let's get started and go and have a look at the system itself. And I'm going to be using this new area within our navigation buttons down the bottom side of our navigation pane called Setup and Extensions. Within here we have our service connections that I was talking about, and this is where we can specify our GovTalk, as it is called. So this is where we set up the details for our connection to HMRC. Just from our navigate button here, I can go to the setup, and of course, because this is a test company, I can't put actual credentials in here, but this is where you will put in your username, and to get this information you will actually have to apply, or so I'm informed, to HMRC for these details. So username and the password provided. The gateway is already populated for you, and you'll notice that there is a little button here, the test mode button. So this does allow you just to make sure that everything is okay, both with your URL and checking that your username and password is correct. So that is quite useful so that we can test before actually going live. Once we've set that up, we need to actually make sure that we've got the other details set up as far as our VAT postings and everything is concerned. Again, we've got this new area called Manual Setup, and within our Manual Setup you'll notice that there are the different modules within Navision, and the one that we need to look at for our VAT returns is within the Finance section. All of the VAT related links here to our pages to be able to set up, for example, VAT business posting groups. So the one that I want to just go through at the moment with you is this VAT posting setup, because it is an existing page, but I just want to show you the differences now, what has been changed and added to it. Exactly the same as we've always seen it with our VAT business posting groups and VAT product posting group combinations. But just to the right here, you'll see we have this used in ledger entries column, and what that allows us to do is to just drill in to that field, and it then displays all the entries that have been posted on that combination, pretty much like you can do from your VAT statement itself, but just another place that you can go to get that information. And of course you can set your filters to look at the date range, for example, that you're after. The other place that I need to show you is this VAT report setup. Here is just where your usual sort of little setup page where you're specifying what the number series are. Also, you have the opportunity here to determine whether you're going to allow for the submitted reports to be modified, i.e. reopened and resubmitted. No right or wrong on there. If you want to keep full audit trail of what you have tried to return and perhaps it has failed, then I would suggest that you won't have that ticked, and then you just create new VAT returns for each time you try. Last but not least, I want to cover the VAT statements with you, and again I could just use my search box. I don't have to come to manual setup. I feel it's quite a quick way to get to that information. I'm using the VAT GB return, and my statement name is, I've just got a default one here, so I'm just going to go to edit VAT statement here. And for those of you who are used to using the Vision, you'll notice that the layout is exactly the same as it's always been, with the exception that we have now this new column called box number, and it is here that you specify which of your entries in our top summary section, which entry relates to the box numbers on our VAT return. So we have this in a nice sequence, but if you have an existing VAT statement, you can still utilise that, just making sure that you have the correct box number on the relevant line. So our top section here is our summary of what has been posted from a VAT perspective, and the lower section, for example, if I just highlight those areas here, we've got our sale transactions, and then we've got our combination. So within our VAT statement, our statement must reflect all the VAT combinations that we have set up on that VAT posting setup. But this is the area that's of importance in terms of what will go through on our return itself. So what we'll do now is we will just have a little look at our statement itself. So I will just go to preview. We still have our same selections in terms of, do we want to just report on open or closed, or open and closed entries? Well, of course we always just use the open, but just in case we have had to post back into a previous VAT quarter, we always use the before and within period selection. Then we have to specify the VAT quarter that we're going to be reporting on. So in this case, because it is a Cronus database, as usual, I will have to put in some quite strange dates. So I'm going to go from 1st of May to the 31st of July, and you'll notice 2019, as I say, because this is a Cronus database. Here are the figures that we're looking for when we then run, and I'll just bring that down slightly and run our calc and post. And again, as usual, we will leave the starting date empty because we want to be able to pick up any entries that haven't been reconciled previously. Our ending date, in my case, it's the end of July 2019. My posting date, can give the document a number, anything that we want. Our settlement account, as far as our GL, our charge of accounts, is concerned. And then I'm going to be leaving these additional boxes here unticked, because when I'm doing my first reconciliation, I don't want to have to see all of the VAT entries, so I'm not ticking the show VAT entries, and I'm certainly not posting at the moment because I'm not sure that my VAT statement itself is going to reflect the same postings as on my Calc and Post. So I'm going to do a preview there so that hopefully I'm going to be able to have my statement and my Calc and Post side by side on the screen so we can perform that reconciliation. I'll just make that slightly bigger so that we can read it more clearly. Pop that over to that side, and then now come to our VAT statement preview, which is here. So of course what our first port of call is that our net VAT to be paid or reclaimed field here ties up with our total field on our Calc and Post. So very pleased to say that that does indeed tie up, but of course it is important that we also make sure that the other fields, the other combinations, are also reporting the same information. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, if we look at on our sales for the combination domestic and VAT 20, and we're looking at the VAT amount field, so when we look over onto our Calc and Post, we're looking for our domestic, VAT 20, sale, and the VAT amount, which is 438,000 odd, and indeed we have got that same figure on our VAT statement. So once we are happy that our statement does reflect our Calc and Post, we can of course post our VAT Calc and Post settlement itself, but I would probably recommend that before you do that you actually do your submission. I'm going to keep those there so we can just confirm that when we do the VAT return itself that we have the same details. So on my home navigation pane, because I'm in the accountant's role centre, I do actually have this new page, the VAT return itself. Now you can see I've been having a little play here, and indeed anything I do is going to be rejected because I'm only going to be in test mode and my credentials aren't valid anyway. But I'm going to create a new VAT return, populate my VAT number, and to correct the information that's here, you just have to go to the suggest lines icon on your home ribbon. And very similar to when we're creating our VAT statement itself, which entries do we want to include? Open, closed, or open and closed? Well, in this case, we're doing just our open entries. Again, the before and within. Which VAT statement template are we using? And I'm using the GB1. And our statement name is our default. Now you have some options here, but as far as us here in the UK are concerned, we just need to change our dates. It's a case of if you enter here, year, type or period, then that overwrites what's here, and vice versa. If you enter the details here, it will wipe out what's here. So I'm doing 0105 to the 31st of July, and we say OK. And those lines then get populated with the details as per our statement. And just to confirm that, if I go to my statement preview, then I can check those figures are indeed the same as per my statement. So I have my box 5 field, which again I have the correct details, VAT statement preview. So once we're happy that our return is looking like exactly the same as what we have reconciled to, then we release our VAT return, and when we release it then allows us access to the other icons on our home ribbon. If for whatever reason we realise that things aren't quite right, then we can just simply reopen and then we can resuggest lines. However, I'm going to do my submit, and of course it will give me an error because indeed, as I said earlier, my credentials aren't correct. We see that error down the bottom here. We can go up to download submission message. So here we can see like an HTML file of the details that were sent through. Not very meaningful, but we can do that if we need to. Or we can download the response message. And here we can see all the details of my credentials that I popped in, and authentication failure because the supplied user credentials failed validation, i.e. I haven't got a valid user name or password. Of course, we know that that's the case, but in this case, what you could do if you have ticked the box, you can do cancel submission, but if you remember on the VAT setup, I unticked that box, so I'm not allowed to cancel this submission because of that setup on the VAT report setup screen. If I had have ticked that box, I could have cancelled that submission and I could have then amended, resuggest lines and done whatever was required to get the details correct. So at this point in time, there's nothing much else I can do with this. So you can see here that you have that full audit trail. So rather than resubmitting a rejected one, you could actually just check what details were different between the different submissions. Entirely up to you as to how you want to handle that. But once you have got your submission and it has gone through correctly, the status will be that it has been accepted. And I'll just show you those status there. At the various phases of the submission, open is when you're creating it, released is when you've clicked on that release button, accepted would be when HMRC have come back and said, yes, the submission is accepted. You can close it, or it can be closed, rejected, which obviously we've seen, cancelled, and the partially accepted. As I haven't been able to run through that, I'm not quite sure what partially accepted means, but I just know that it means that you would be able to resubmit if required. So as at the point in time when your submission has been successful, what I would then suggest is that you then come back to your VAT statement, rerun it as you would do normally, but as far as your calc and post goes at this point, then you would run it again, this time ticking the box to show the VAT entries, doing the post, then either printing to a printer or to a PDF and posting in the normal way, and likewise with your VAT statement, exactly the same as we have always been doing prior to being able to do the online submission. So we have now come to the end of our short demonstration on how the new VAT return functionality works. I hope that you have enjoyed today's session, and if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything with us, please send an email to support@4ps.co.uk or give us a call on the number shown on your screen, taking option 2 for support. Thank you for joining us again on this session, and I look forward to meeting with you again on our next one.